On this episode of 5 Minutes of Cloud, installing OpenStack. Is that really what you want to do? So you have a stack of shiny servers, and you've decided you're going to deploy OpenStack because that's really what your business needs. And I probably don't disagree with you, but it's not really just about installing OpenStack, is it? OpenStack installation used to be a real pain, to put it nicely. It's gotten a lot better. There are a number of different tools from the OpenStack Ansible project. A massive amount of work has gone into both the OpenStack Puppet services and the OpenStack Chef-based installation platforms. All of these tools are there to help you build basically any kind of OpenStack service that you really want. But that's not really the big problem. The big problem is actually managing and monitoring and maintaining the OpenStack environment once you get it installed. And this is something that I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in the OpenStack community to address. What we're finding is that the ability to turn OpenStack on is and was the historical problem with using OpenStack. But now it's really much more about how do you actually keep the system running. How do you actually collect metrics that are meaningful? A lot of work has gone into updating the Ceilometer project as an example of a way to capture the data that you need in order to understand what your system is doing. How much compute capacity are you actually using on a day-by-day basis over a period of time? Dealing with that time series data of understanding the OpenStack services is a really important aspect. There are projects like Monasca, which are being used by folks like the HP Enterprise organization in their cloud environments, and some other providers as well, which took another approach to understanding the monitoring and metering of an OpenStack environment. There are also now projects that are coming along that are just looking at the metering aspects, effectively the billing integration aspects of OpenStack services, as a way to gather statistics and data that can be used to track how OpenStack is being used in your organization, how much capacity is actually in actual use. The fact that you have 50 virtual machines deployed, for example, onto one server may or may not be a problem, especially if those 50 machines are sitting idle most of the time. So really understanding what your OpenStack system is doing is a big project in and of itself. So something to really be aware of. Again, not just about turning it on, it's about monitoring it. The second aspect is maintenance. Dealing with and having a plan for maintaining an OpenStack environment is a huge problem that a lot of people overlook when they first think they're going to turn this service on. Classically, I've worked with folks that have deployed OpenStack and said, well, we're just going to deploy DevStack as a way to understand it. We'll let a couple of people use this little single server DevStack environment, and that's all we're going to do, until they suddenly realize somebody actually built something that uses that platform in a meaningful way for their business, and they don't want to turn it off. And that's the worst case scenario, is using something like DevStack, which is a script effectively intended for the development community to simplify the process of turning on all those services that you're not working on because you need to have them running in order to understand if your service that you are working on is actually working. So once you understand that these pieces need to come together and they need to be deployed, and then you need to maintain them, there's a lot more that goes into deploying OpenStack than just turning it on. But the upgradability is one that's a real problem, and I think of all the work that's gone into it, the one project that I think shows the most promise and is probably the right path for many is to look at the Cola project, or the OpenStack Ansible model against containers. This seems to be the direction that many in the community are going. Whether they've followed that process exactly or they've gotten there through a different means, the concept of using containers as service entities that hold OpenStack components. OpenStack, in this case, then acts just like a distributed application running inside of containers, and then a configuration process management tool like Ansible, which is actually lighter weight than something like Puppet or Chef, may make sense unless you have compliance issues that you need to address. Now, this is really painting things with a broad brush, so there are lots of different ways of looking at this, but the Puppet and Chef world were built around the concept of application deployment compliance. Are your security services up to date? Are your systems patched to the right levels? Things of that nature. That was effectively their reason for existing to begin with. They were pressed into service as configuration and deployment automation tools, and while they do a very good job of that for many application environments, OpenStack has so many interacting components that it's actually not necessarily the best approach to use something like Puppet or Chef for those particular aspects of the system. So we're seeing both hybrid approaches and all-in-one approaches, whether you do an all Puppet, an all Chef, an all Ansible approach. There's seeing lots of different pathways for this. But one way or another, you're going to want something that lets you define what service is currently running in your environment. And that's the again, the background behind a lot of these tools. The CAPS tools, I think, is a fairly common way of describing them today. So again, my view right now is the OpenStack Cola project, along with the Ansible configuration tools, is a great way of getting the basics of OpenStack up and running, and giving you a path at least to define the long-term configuration environment within your OpenStack services, and specifically the ability to restart a service, reconfigure that service back to its known expected state, and that gives you an upgrade path. The ability to upgrade specific service components as containers is incredibly powerful, especially when you consider that a container can have some embedded state. They tend to think of themselves as ephemeral, but we're still writing an image and potentially updating that image within the running environment. And that updated state can actually be used as a way to manage the deployment of an upgraded new service or the rollback back to an older version of that service. Now, the one issue with all upgrades and downgrades in the OpenStack service space is dealing with the data structures. The database backing data stores for all of these different services, whether it's MySQL or Postgres or even into Oracle, those data structures are designed to upgrade at least one version. So from a Mitaka to Newton, or from a Liberty to Mitaka release. They're not designed to go from a Juno release to a Liberty release, skipping a release in the middle. So this is something that you have to be aware of, and it may limit how you do your upgrades, when you do your upgrades, and even managing the process between them. So in thinking about getting OpenStack running, again, it's not about the installation process. It's really more about how are you monitoring it, and how are you going to maintain it in the long run? How are you going to upgrade the system? If you can answer those two questions, I think you're a lot further along in getting an OpenStack system that can actually be a production viable environment for use in your environment. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. In addition, if you want to stay apprised of the latest ongoing updates in the cloud space, sign up for our Twitter feed and our mailing list. We also update you on upcoming webinars and classes that we provide.